Alrighty. Romans chapter 1. It's hard to get out of, isn't it? Now I know why there's people that spend 10 years in Romans. It's really hard to stay on target. Oh, we're gonna take several iterations through the last 15 verses or so. We've already done it. We've already talked about a lot of it. And then the idea would be to introduce these ideas, these concepts, these major themes, and then pick up on them later, draw them out as we move along, because it's not like the righteousness of God. He's going to drop the subject of the righteousness of God. That's going to continue. So we'll have other times to talk about it. Jews and Gentiles, he'll talk about that later at length. So the law, which is coming up, which is a major issue. I'm going to have some things to say about that. So let's see, where do I want to start this? Let's start at verse 14, just to remind ourselves. I am under obligation both to Greeks and to barbarians, and we talked about that. I took that, I don't know how the pastor feels about this, as basically cultured, Greek-speaking, Hellenistic Gentiles, and what they would consider uncultured, non-Greek speaking natives of lands around the empire and so forth. You know, because everything in the Roman Empire was about social strata, right? These social groups, and everybody had to be put in one or more of these social groups. And so, you know, a Greek-speaking Roman, that's a redundant, all the Romans, I think, were Greek speakers. You know, they're in a class by themselves, and they would judge other people based on that criteria. And so that's, you know, Luke points this out when Paul gets to Malta. They were the natives. That's this word right here. The natives of the land were treated us with no little kindness. He used one of his little unique to Luke grammatical constructions, but it's not a negative connotation. It comes over into English negative, but I think they just mean what they would consider uncultured because they're not Hellenistic. That's what I think about that. The wise and the foolish will be parallel to that. Appositional, Greek, wise, barbarian, native, non-Greek speakers, foolish. Although maybe he doesn't mean that. Maybe we can talk about that later. The philosophically schooled versus not, I don't know. I'll have to think about that. And so we see the fourth use of the word gospel, third use of the word gospel here. 1, 2, 3. It was the gospel of God, the gospel of his son. And now just the gospel. And now he uses it and he begins his treatise, if you will. For I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. For in it the righteousness of God is revealed from faith to faith, as it is written, but the righteous man shall live by faith. So we can fool with some words here, depending on how you want to interpret, how you want to translate this. I am not ashamed of the gospel. It is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. For in it a righteousness from God is revealed by faith first to last. Not that he has to mean, that's right. From faith to faith, from faith to faith. Yeah, it's ambiguous. I mean, it's never used again. So you don't know, you know, all you can do is note it and then keep studying and see if you can learn some things that will help you go back and understand what he means. That's the hermeneutical circle that I talk about. You have a sense of the whole writing. You read the parts, which alter your sense of the whole, which alters your sense of the parts. And there's this back and forth thing, this resolution to a conflict of interpretation as you understand the whole thing better. But you don't necessarily do that until you get far into the book. So we have, yeah, so we have these, yes, this is a highly introductory in terms of the concepts he introduces. Concepts is kind of a modern Western idea, but let's use the more technical things he's introducing rather than concepts. Salvation, everyone, that has meaning to it, that matters, that he uses the word everyone. Jew first and to the Greek. Righteousness, revealed, faith. Those are all things that he introduces all of those, for lack of a better word, concepts in 2 verses And now for the next 11 chapters or so till 12:1, he will expound on those things, which is why we don't have to exhaust them right now. But I will say this, from faith to faith, the pastor got on it. For in it, the righteousness of God is revealed by faith and only faith, as distinct from something like the law. I don't know yet. In the gospel through faith. That's right. But the definitive nature of the way he says from faith to faith seems to be exclusive, to add an air of exclusivity about it, which may bring in no law, which he's going to get to in just a minute. I don't know. We got to think, you know, you don't want to read into it, but there's this exclusive, exhaustive and exclusive. It's exclusively about, it is revealed exclusively within the domain of faith. And if once you say exclusively, exclusive of what? And then you got to start talking about things like the law, which he will, and Moses and so forth. But anyway, then in the quote from Habakkuk, the righteous man shall live by faith. They're supplying the word man there. The righteous shall live by faith. That's the be a very literal translation of the Greek text of the Old Testament, the Septuagint, which is perfectly fair. However, the question remains in Paul's mind, what did he mean by that? And so you will see, for example, let's take a look at one. Let's introduce it and move on. What does the New International Version say here? The righteous will live by faith, so they leave out man, but that's the same. I think it's the, I remember. Oh, I did this. I put this on a slide. Use your slides, Gary. You spent the time on them. No, we'll get back to that later. And that, and that, and that, and that. Where is it? Here it is. No, that's not it. No. Just a minute. There it is. Hello. Yeah, here it is. Look at different translations. You want to do that a lot to settle out, you know, the possibilities for translation, because it matters. This is a case where it matters. NASB, the righteous shall live by faith. Righteous man shall live by. KJV, the just shall live by faith. The Message, working a little harder. The person in right standing before God by trusting him really lives. They started so good. They ended so bad. It really lives. I don't think I've ever heard eternal life talked about as really living. Because in order to really get it, you got to have the physical, really, like really, you got to put it in there. Yeah, I know. I just, I pick on it a lot. So I found it interesting that they took a stab at it. They didn't, you know, yeah. International Children's Bible, the person who is made right with God by faith will live forever. So you can see the different, it's not straightforward. In Paul's writing, it's not straightforward. RSV, which is parallel to in the Greek English text, Nestle Allen, that's New American Standard and RSV. RSV is the translation of the committee that edits the Greek text of the New Testament, the Nestle Allen. They had their own translation into English, which is the Revised Standard Version from the 50s, very old now. He who through faith is righteous will live. I think I'm going to go with that one. He who through faith is righteous will live. The Septuagint, which is the Greek text of the New Testament, the righteous by his faith will live. Oh, that is like that. So it's in, you can see why now, right? Once you see it in the Septuagint, huh? Yeah, that is a typo. Thank you. Twice. Gee, I wonder if I copied and pasted that. The righteous by his faith will live. So you can see why you would look at the Septuagint and you would go, which way do we go with this? It literally sits right at the peak. It's right there on the top of the, what's that bar I fell off of and slammed my head against? Where you swing around. Wait, the monkey bars. It's right there at the top and it can go either way. Then an alternate take on the Septuagint, the righteous by faith will live. So the RSV goes one, huh? I did that. So which way does by faith go? The righteous by faith will live, or the righteous will live by faith? Which does it modify? In the Septuagint?
Why would be
I think it's X from.
and
Ek.
faith becomes the source of that life.
Oh, did you just correct me? No, that's okay. That's all right.
And by is
I'm a recognition guy. I see it in the text and I read it, but
same word. But if it's act, I mean the other
right there.
source would be faith would be the source. They don't love
Ek. From faith. Dikaios. You've heard that word before. Dikaiosune is the noun. Righteous, just. From faith. Will live. So he quoted it exactly as it sits in the Septuagint. It's a word for word direct. He uses it. He translates it. He copies it over directly from anyway. Okay, we're getting a little geeky here, which is to say Greeky. So let's go back. Anyway, there you are. You have some information. Based on where Paul is going, you can decide whether this sort of thing, New American Standard, is closer to the idea that Paul is trying to communicate, or whether the RSV is closer to where Paul is headed. Yes, but is Paul trying to say something about the righteous person, or about the manner in which the righteous person lives?
I think the reason that righteous people is produced by
Okay.
faith is the source of.
In which case, if it's the latter, from what I said, then our mandate from the verse is to go live by faith. I don't think that's Paul was saying. No, that's right. It's not false, but that's just because something is true doesn't mean this text is saying it.
I think when you put the context of what he's saying, the gospel, righteousness is revealed. How is it revealed? Because people who are changed, transformed by the gospel, righteous people that live out of their faith. And then God's righteousness is also revealed.
It's also, since the gospel is Christ, let's just make it simple. He is through faith, a person is brought in Christ, and so to speak, in that domain, in that realm. That's the realm of righteousness. That's the realm of Christ. Righteousness is revealed by Christ through faith to thinking out loud. There's so many different ways to do this. Let's not overthink it for the moment. Let's just, we understand. We'll talk about it more later. But I do want to highlight then, look at the next verse. What was that? Did I say something? Oh, okay.
I think the logic of the statement is very clear. It's not
Yeah.
ashamed of the gospel. Why? Because it's the power of God and the salvation of those
Yeah.
who believe.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't want to overthink it. And
But then the second part is the other reason he's not ashamed is in it the righteousness of God is revealed. So I think those things informed in the statement that he uses as a proof text from back. I think you got to see all of that together. It's a rational statement. It's not a.
So look at the two statements together, 17 and 18. For in it, the gospel, the righteousness of God is revealed from faith to faith, as is written, the one who is righteous through faith shall live. That's the Gary translation. For the wrath of God, there's two revealeds here, parallel. Verse 17, the righteousness of God is revealed. And in 18, the wrath of God is revealed. From where? Not from faith to faith, but from heaven. So there's a parallelism going on against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth and unrighteousness. From the throne is the way that I often take that. Yeah. So the righteousness of God is revealed. I'll just say it this way: in Christ. Let's just go with that for a second. The wrath of God is revealed from the throne. And it has something to do, they necessarily go together. The revelation of the righteousness of God in Christ brings with it also the revelation of God's wrath, which will also be by Christ. In Christ is a technical term, so we won't use it in regard to this, but by Christ, those come together. So is God a God of love? Yes. Is any less a God of wrath? No. He is every bit the God of wrath that he is the God of love. It all comes in the gospel. Paul will say that explicitly in chapter 2. It's that second part that people tend to want to, I don't know, pretend doesn't exist operationally. Okay. Last week we talked about, let's move on to, did you want to say something? We'll talk about salvation. We got to talk about that later. What he means by, we think we know what he's talking about when he uses a word like that right there. But I'm not sure it's as obvious as we sometimes make it out to be. Or rather, perhaps it's that he means something grander than what we've reduced these things down to. So we're going to reduce, our tendency is to reduce salvation down to justification by faith. And justification by faith down to God's imputed righteousness. Done. Now we understand the gospel. And then the gospel to that. So you ask what the gospel is. The gospel is God justifying believers through faith and accrediting to them his righteousness. Fair enough. Is that all of it? No, it's not all of it. That's the issue at hand. Not that I don't deeply appreciate that. Thank you, Martin Luther. Probably get back to him too. I'll say something about something. Something that Luther wrote. Luther had a way of capturing a thought. There are these writers that can do this. It captures a thought that you wish you always had a hunch about, but you could never put words to it. He's one of those. And he said, we'll talk about this later, but he said, your faith, the righteousness is alien. It originated from outside of you, and it still belongs to the person that it originated from. Your faith is native. Your faith did not originate from outside of you and be imputed to you. It was not an alien faith that was then imputed to you. It is your faith. You were, however you want to say it, made able to have it. But the faith originated in you and continues in you. And through faith, righteousness is obtained. Something like that. But anyway, he had this idea that your faith, righteousness is alien, but your faith is native. And his little dinky statement that captures the essence of something. That's why he's him and I'm me, I guess. I'm very good at quoting master writers. He's considered one of the finest writers, German writers ever in history. Yeah. So is Friedrich Nietzsche, I think, who was not on the same page with Martin Luther. No.
Your faith can become yours.
The righteousness is given.
Okay.
The righteousness is given through faith, which is native to you. He didn't give you faith, and then by doing that, give you righteousness. He made you able. I'm giving away my belief system on these matters here. He made you able. You had faith, and not sequentially, but causally. No, it's never was in us. Yeah. It is native. Oh, no, he means it did not originate from outside of you. God doesn't have faith out there that he then transferred to you. You had faith. At a moment in time, you had faith. Just like you believe in anything else, you had faith. But the reason you had faith is that he did something that allowed that to even be possible. A little bit, yeah. See, I got us down on a rabbit trail. Now we're into all kinds of theological debates and stuff like that. So there's all this stuff is very, very I have a friend who won't read people who believe some of the things that I believe. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's given to you to believe. No, it's given to you to believe. Yes.
I think the point he's making by calling him holy is God doesn't believe for you.
That's right. He is righteous on your behalf. He does not have faith on your behalf and then transfer the faith. It's dangerous stuff. We'll let's wait till there's no avoiding it in chapter 9. Once we get to chapter 9, there's no avoiding the issues of election and calling. All right. Okay, I brought us back from the edge. Brought back from the edge of disaster. Doug Moo. It's one of the commentaries I have read and am reading again on Romans. I recommend it. It's 1,000 pages long, but he says it this way. Believing is a genuinely human activity. He's getting at the same idea. It possesses no merit or worth for which God is somehow bound to reward us. For salvation is, from first to last, God's word. Well said. We'll get back to. Oh, here I go. You got to read the verses above and the verses below your favorite verses. You were dead in your transgressions and sins. And he means something technical by that. It's the Jew talking. And there's this shadowy presence of the law in the back of his mind when he uses transgressions and sins, in which you used to live when you followed the ways of this world, the course of, oh, wait a minute, let's go back to what that sounded. That kind of half memorized in New American Standard, makes it awkward to try to read it out loud. You were dead in your trespasses and sins, which you formerly walked according to the course of this world. That's great language. According to the prince of the power of the air, of the spirit that is now working in the sons of disobedience. You were ruled over. You were in darkness and you were ruled over. You were in chains. And it's really bad because you didn't know you were in chains. So you're not having faith. You're unable, as Augustine would have said. Total here inability. You can't break these chains any more than you can leap to the moon.
That's what I'm hoping you were saying about me. It's not of ourselves. It's a gift of God. Yeah. So I'm hoping.
Well, we're gonna get all right. Well, now we got it. Now we have to do. Now that you said that, I have to talk about Ephesians. Among them, we too all formerly lived in the lusts of our flesh, indulging the desires of our flesh and of the mind. You can see the enslavement. We're by nature children of what? Wrath. Boom. The great two words, but God. Being rich in mercy because of his great love with which he loved us. The way he prefaces the statement. even when we were dead in our transgressions, made us alive together with Christ, raised us up with him and seated us with him in the heavenly places where we already are in a certain sense. Here we go. For by grace you were saved through faith, and this, why did they translate that? Is that a that? This word right here? At any rate, now you got to do a little Greek since you brought up the issue. Is that referring to, what is it referring to? Is it referring to grace, saved, or faith? That, what is the that is not of ourselves? It is is it the grace, the salvation, or the faith?
All of it together.
This word right here, that, it matters, is neuter.
The other three are feminine.
All three of these, salvation, masculine or feminine? Soteria, no, it's feminine. All three of these are, no, I'm just thinking of yeah, that's a good point. But at any rate, I think in any case, none of them are neuter. Feminine, I think it's feminine, I think they're right. Feminine, but he uses a neuter, what do you call, demonstrative pronoun. It's neuter. In Greek, it always is supposed to follow the gender of the verb, of the word that it modifies. He doesn't do that. Why? Well, first of all, it'd be ambiguous which one of the three, since they're all feminine. Or is he saying all of the whole dynamic, by grace, saved by grace through faith, is not of yourselves. It is the gift of God. Yeah. Now we're back to from
Point out, though, it's all of them, and none of the three can be of ourselves.
unless he's thinking of it as, that's a good point. I'll have to think about that.
Think about it. That's the point that they tell me, well, it's not where you find it.
Oh, I agree. In a way, I agree that faith is not of yourself.
Well, I think all those things are not of ourselves.
Yeah, but it is,
Faith is grace.
but I'm just saying that it did, you already said it too, that it didn't originate. The faith itself wasn't imputed or something to you like the righteousness.
I think the biggest point you got to make, the biggest point he keeps making, we have to believe ourselves. God doesn't believe.
That's exactly right. It's our belief.
He gives us the ability to do it. and we
That's
have to
right.
do it.
That's right. Yeah.
If he doesn't give us the ability to do it, then it's work.
And I have friends that would be either storming out of the room right now or standing up in the back of the room throwing things at me by this point. So we'll talk about why, if you don't understand that, a lot of people in here realize that was true when I started caveating all this, but we'll talk about, we'll get into all that later. It's offensive. It's offensive to believe that I'm this helpless. It's offensive to the modern American mind. Who do you think you are to tell me that I have no merit, that I couldn't believe in God even if I wanted to? To which I respond, you will never want to. That's right. He reaches his hand out, but you have to reach up and take it. It's like a gift. He offers the gift, but you have to take it. Think of it as a gift that you're not able to reach out and take unless he enables you to take it. You do take it. But the only reason you take it is he fixed your arm, so to speak. Yeah, it's very, very offensive to the modern mind. Individualistic, sovereign mind, this idea of human individual sovereignty. It's not even individuality, individual freedom, it's individual sovereignty. I control myself and I control my own destiny. It's defensive to all of that. So is this idea of a creator, which we'll get back to right now. So wrath of God is revealed from heaven, contrary statement, encapsulated, subsumed within the idea of the revelation of God's righteousness against all ungodliness and unrighteousness. Gee whiz, a New American Standard. You chose for once to not be gender neutral. That's interesting right there. Men who suppress the truth and unrighteousness. It's not men. It's not the men, but only the ones who suppress the truth and unrighteousness. It's men that is all of that, everyone who, how do I say that? The suppressing of the truth and righteousness happens by all people, period. That's his point. Not just, he's not targeting just a specific subset of men, the ones who suppress the truth. He's categorized all in the same group and then characterized them as those who suppress the truth and unrighteousness. Why? Because that which is known about God is evident within them, for God made it evident to them. How did he do so? For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature, his invisible attributes, that is to say, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made. So the invisibility, the hiddenness of God, that which cannot be seen in God is seen in the creation. You cannot see God, God says to Moses. You cannot see God and live. Paul says, you don't need to see him. He becomes evident in the things that he created. So much so that those who suppress the truth and unrighteousness are without excuse. He has made himself universally evident through his creation. He's planted the created order is the archaeological evidence of God and his eternal power and divine nature. It's full of archaeology that reveals God in the past and God in the present.
God is not nature.
But God is, it's right, it reveals, but it is not nature. There's a whole religious school, Alfred North Whitehead, masterful, was he a mathematician? I forget what he was. But he sort of developed this theory of belief called pantheism. Was it panentheism? Is it pantheism where God and the universe God is not just revealed in the universe, he is the universe. It's extremely complex, almost, it's like Immanuel Kant, it's almost too opaque, but there's a lot of people walking around that believe that kind of thing. That God is the trees. God is not evident through the trees. God in some fashion is the trees. And so is the leaf, and so is the snow, and so on and so forth.
Practical applications of that stated views, like in Star Trek, and Star Wars,
Yeah, where every single person has a piece of God, the force in them, and there's a balance, right? The balance in the episode 3, there was supposed to be a balance brought back to the force, and the point of the balance was to bring the dark side of the force and the good side of the force into alignment. That ain't in the Bible. The Bible is about total victory. That's already been achieved. Victory in Jesus, period.
Sounds like pantheism is a way around the idea of a creator then.
I don't know. I don't remember how Whitehead handled that. Yeah, he had a way of handling that, because how do you get started? He's more than the trees. He's more than the creation. He's not only the creation, but he is the creation, and he changes with the changes in creation. There's an interchange going, symbiosis of some kind. I don't know. I have to go back, and somebody can Google Alfred North Whitehead and get a summary of his. He's just way too smart for his own good. There's a lot of people like that. Okay, anyway, let's get on with it. Without excuse, let's remember that term. He's going to use exactly the same phrase in an important way in Romans chapter 2, verse 1. How did they become? How is it that they, in professing to be, how did they become fools? In what manner did they become fools? He gives you the answer in the next statement. They exchanged the truth of God. They exchanged the glory of the incorruptible God for an image in the form of corruptible man, of birds and four-footed animals and crawling creatures. So you see, for example, where is it? Exchange language. Now here, I don't know how he feels about this, but here, everybody's convinced he's talking about, or a lot of people are convinced he's talking about the pagan world. I'm not 100% on that, Because the language he's using has an eerie reflection in the prophetic word. So here he's talking about exchanging the glory of the incorruptible God for an image. But when you go to some of these passages, has a nation changed gods when they were not gods? But my people have changed their glory for that which does not profit. And there's the exchange. There's another one here, though. Psalm 100, yeah, here it is. This is a reference back to what chapter in Exodus? Important chapter. 32. I don't know why I'm pointing. What direction is that? For some reason, I'm pointing east. I don't know why I'm pointing east. This is Exodus chapter 32, the molting of the golden calf. They made a calf at Horeb, worshiped a molten image. They exchanged their glory, Yahweh, for an image of an ox that eats grass. That's spoken about Israelites. Now, Paul writes here about who exactly? They exchanged the glory of the incorruptible God for an image in the form of an ox that eats grass. So he could just be taking over the language and applying it to the Gentile, pagan Gentile world, or there's something else going on here. Yeah, but I'm just saying, is he subsuming a past of Israel in his condemnation here, in his universal condemnation here?
I think referring to it, but I think it's broader.
Oh, yeah, no question. Yeah, no question. Yes. No, I'm not saying it's not broader.
It's talked about making God not God.
I'm saying a lot of commentators want to say he's going to move systematically, because we're systematic about these kinds of things, from the pagan Gentile world to the righteous man and then to the Jew. And I'm saying, well, maybe already he's already implicating more than just the pagan Gentile world. That's what I'm saying. So he does this pattern. This is the advantage of colors. You can see it. 3 uses of exchanged, 3 uses of God gave them over in parallel, one right after another. So we'll go ahead and read it, and then we'll look at it in a slide. Therefore, God gave them over in the lust of their hearts to impurity, so that their bodies would be dishonored among them. Now you can see, flowing from the idolatry, it doesn't just infect naturally and irresistibly human interaction, but sexual behavior. He goes immediately to it. So that their bodies might be dishonored among them, for they exchanged the truth of God for a lie. And what does that consist in? They worshiped and served the creature rather than the creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. He can't say the word creator without giving it some kind of blessing in regard to it. So we're back once again to the rejection of the creator, the overthrowing, if you will, from a human perspective, of the creator, which naturally results in this kind of behavior. You see this an immediate collapse into this kind of behavior. For this reason, here we go again, God gave them over to degrading passions. There it is again. For the women exchanged the natural function for that which is unnatural, and natural from the vantage point of the created order, the design which God implanted in the universe was supposed to be reflected in behavior patterns as well. And in the same way, also, the men abandoned the natural function of the woman and burned in their desire toward one another, men with men committing indecent acts and receiving in their own persons the due penalty of their error. It's a terrifying statement. So that's it. Now, when you look at this sort of all together, you get this. They, whoever they are, exchanged the glory of the incorruptible God for idols. Therefore, God gave them over to impurity. The truth of God or about God for a lie by worshiping and serving the created. Therefore, God gave them over to degrading passions. They exchanged that which is natural for what is unnatural. Therefore, God gave them over to a depraved mind. And we're at the bottom.
We have a government controlled media and education system in our society that excludes God.
We're going to have to talk about today. In this, yeah, I don't know if we'll get to it this week, but I have a lot to say about today. It's really a whole summer. We didn't get here out of nowhere. How did we get here? Indeed. No. Handed them over. Sounds a little more active, doesn't it?
they acted in a way that deserved judgment, so we just let them go to them, satisfied with it.
I'm going to go a little stronger than that. Not what he did in Genesis chapter 3. The man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil, that he might stretch out. God drove him, sent him, drove him out of the garden. Pretty strong language. The four spiritual laws and crusades say man chose to go his own way. No. I can imagine Adam begging on hands and knees, begging God to let him stay in the garden. Adam did not give him the finger and march off to the east. Fine, I'll go on my own. That's not what was happening. Because God had to take care of him. He had to make clothes for him and stuff like that. But he drove him from the garden. And Moose says it this way. I mean, Kathy, okay. Moose says it this way. Where does he say it? He had a pretty good way of encapsulating this. Wow, I made some progress. I'm already in chapter 10 of these, page 10 of these notes. Just a minute. It's a good quote, so I'm gonna try to find it.
With every evil or bad deed kind of conflict.
Here it is. God does not simply let the boat go. He gives it a push downstream. That's the way Moose says it. I don't know if you agree or not, but yes. You know, this is the kind of language of Jesus being handed over to the Romans. There's an active part played by the people handing him over. They didn't just stand idly by and let the Romans take Jesus. That's what the idea is. And I think that's probably right.
It's like short of like, John Hardy and Bert, he's already been Hardy.
There's a heart that I mean, you can use different words, but it certainly is not excluded. It's certainly not excluded here. He gave them over to degrading passions. He delivered them based on their desire for degrading passions. Not without his intervention. Yeah. But remember, if he's restraining, maybe all he has to do when it says gave over, I'm just guessing, maybe it is simply he removes his restraint. He removes his restraint and nature takes its course. I don't know. He didn't consult me on this, so I don't have the detail. That's right. That's right. We're going to use a word, maybe we won't get to it this week, feral. I'm going to use the word feral about this. Yes. And I do not mean members of a pack. Pack animals are not feral. Pack animals have rules. The wolf pack has rules, and you better take the rules seriously. You're going to find out right now what the rules are. Yeah, it's brutal when they disobey the rules. So pack animals have rules. Feral is this. It's not pack animal. It's not running wild with a pack. It's this. Just as they did not see fit to acknowledge God any longer, God gave them over to a depraved mind to do those things which are not proper, meaning according to the created order. And here we go with feral. Being filled with all unrighteousness, wickedness, greed, evil, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, malice, gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, arrogant, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, without understanding, untrustworthy, unloving, unmerciful. That sounds pretty feral. And although they know the ordinance of God, that those who practice such things, that's an important phrase for the next chapter, are worthy of death. They not only do the same, but also give hearty approval to those who practice them. It's the opposite of a pack. Packs keep their members in order. He's talking about the opposite of that. The celebration and encouragement and fostering of disorder, of entropy, moral entropy. moral collapse, something like that. That's what he's getting at right here. So we have to talk about at some point our day and age. I was just curious. The word Pharaoh came to my mind because after what happened on a certain Tuesday recently with regard to some things that were proposed on certain pieces of paper and the success of them and the morality reflected in that, the word Pharaoh came to my mind in regard to the moral framework that was involved. And here's some synonyms from Pharaoh. I'll just read them. Wild, undomesticated, uncontrolled, untrained, unsubdued, untamed, brute, brutal, barbarous, unbroken, bestial, uncivilized, undocile. And I'll read that list again. This is a behavioral thing. Here's the moral equivalent of it. It's what it looks like. Now think about our cities and so forth. What's going on? We're gonna have to do that next week. Yeah, let's keep going. So you can't run a society like this. You can't run a world like this forever. Yeah. Now, this chapter is about 750 words long. So within 650 words or so of this wonderful introduction, grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ, he's unloading this. So it's 550 words later or something like that. He's unloading this.
Don't you think that stuff is what caused Rome to be?
Yeah, there's a whole books written, all kinds of theories on what caused the fall of the Roman Empire. I just watched one recently, and it was about how the barbarians used in our more English sense, the Germanic tribes invaded and the Huns invaded. And those invasions from the north on the western side of the empire eventually had their effect. But Rome was highly, the word that you can use is decadent. Degenerate, it had a degenerate morality, but it was a pack morality. The Romans were brutal in their enforcement of order and peace, right? You did not get out of line or you paid the price. This is not that. They had these things, but this, as far as the Roman Empire goes, this did not rule the Roman Empire, at least not this early, because they were brutal in their suppression of disorder, which is also why it lasted so long. The Roman Empire lasted 1,000 years. Some would say it collapsed for 600 years. It was a 600-year-long collapse, but maybe even longer, maybe 1,500 years. I haven't stopped. I got 4 minutes left. All right. The foundational truth of all that exists, in my view, the universally self-evident fact of God's rightful rule over his creation, universally self-evident. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Every single human being who ever lived or ever will live is accountable to God based on that undeniable, universally self-evident fact of existence. So our post-Christian world rejects Christianity at its foundational truth. It doesn't just reject Jesus. It goes all the way down to the bottom, all the way to Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, and rejects that. And then everything else follows. And then we end up with, based on that, just like in Romans chapter 1, we end up in a world of this. They follow one after another. Just as they did not see fit to acknowledge God, to acknowledge the truth about God, to worship God as creator, we get this. And from that perspective, it makes total sense. So the question is going to become, how did we get here? We didn't get here. I mean, this is a relatively new thing. Like less than 40 years old, 50, 60 years. You can see the fruit, you can see the seeds of it. Let's just go back to the 1930s with the Frankfurt School, with the critical race theory, the rise of cultural Marxism came into America, United States. That's what, the 30s, 40s? Right around World War II. But before that, none of this was true. A very tight, morally tidy society more than 90 years ago. Very morally tidy, not morally feral at all. So something happened.
And people believed in God, maybe they weren't saved by faith, but they at least it's.
They did. And other things, obviously. So we'll do that. We'll do that next week. Talk about application, right?
That last slide.
I just made that up, so I'm accountable for that. I didn't read that. I can't blame a writer for that.
Sure.
Not without falling on the list of grievances that Paul has against the world in chapter 1. You got it? You want to take a picture of it, or? I should probably just go ahead. What I should do is we can put the slides back on the website, and I can post a link in the description of for this kind of stuff on the feed, on the Zoom feed and on YouTube. So we're going to talk about this. This is how we started the process of this feral world that we live in now. That's increasingly physically feral, not just morally feral. If you look at the cities, the way the cities are going right now.
You saying it's worse than it was back then?
What? No, I'm not. We got to analyze that. Well, I said, well, actually, no, we don't. I'm starting looking, I'm doing comparisons. And one of the comparisons is the fact that they had this degenerate morality, like in the temples and so forth. But over the top of that, they had the Romans, and the Romans did not tolerate, they had limits. The Romans did not tolerate getting out of line. Where are we today? And then where are we go? You know, it's more like that. There's some parallels, but Rome was the Roman world. We looked at Thessalonica and Philippi, Corinth. There's a reason that Paul goes after these people to not be involved with temple prostitutes. Temple prostitutes. We've never heard of such a thing. They did. They had to be told not to do that sort of thing. You know, that's 1 Corinthians chapter 6. That's all of 1 Corinthians chapter 6. The context is temple prostitutes. He has to write that to the church. So there's your degenerate morality. Maybe we can do maybe I'll look into that a little bit. We can do a little comparison, but we're going to talk about the physicality, the victory of physicality over spirituality, physicality over the transcendent in our culture over the last couple of hundred years, a little bit. But I think it all comes to play in this right here. So we'll go back and revisit some of this. I'm going to move on to chapter 2 a little bit next week, but we can go back and revisit some of these. We're going to have to. You just keep circling back to these things. Yeah, we'll go with chapter 2. I'm going to have more to say eventually because I hardly followed my notes. I had 14 pages of notes. No, well, for chapter 1. An ugly list, isn't it? It's disturbing. It's creepy.
But so is that list in the scripture?
Yeah, this one's pretty creepy too. Yeah. All right, that's enough. See you next week. Don't be mad at me. I didn't write it.